I'm working on this John Deere 110 garden tractor. In the last video, I made a new tie rod with left-handed threads, and I got both tie rods installed on the tractor. Now I'm going to start taking some parts off of the engine so I can clean everything. First is this starter generator bracket. This has two different size nuts. That's probably not supposed to be that way. These thick washers are there to support that starter generator bracket. That gasket's no good. I probably have one of those, so I'll replace that. I'm going to leave this push rod in just to plug the hole while I'm cleaning it. That brass bushing back there is loose. That's not good. Yeah, that brass bushing should be back in farther, but if you tighten it, this shaft locks up. I'll have to fix that before it goes back together. I want to remove the round governor disc for cleaning, so I need to get this brass bushing out, but it's stuck on the paint that's on the shaft. Then I'll put the brass bushing back in to hold the shaft in while I'm cleaning it. Now I'm going to get all the big chunks off the block. This carburetor gasket is nicely stuck to the block. I'm going to leave that on there. That screw there is loose. That shouldn't be loose. It keeps the governor gear in position inside the block. That stuff is cleaned up, and I'm going to start putting this back together. Before the top 10 goes on, remember this starter generator bracket goes on top of the sheet metal, so it needs these thick flat washers on the studs, because you don't want the bracket to be mashing the cooling fins. When you tighten it up, all of the clamping force should be on those two washers. You can tell from the original paint, the top 10 should be over the outside of the side 10. Then I want to make sure all the other screw holes line up before tightening this screw. I remember the bigger nut was on the end. I don't remember where this cable was. But here's a witness mark here. That matches up to this. So that's where I'm going to put it. The governor shaft locks up when I tighten this brass bushing. Normally you can move this bearing on the other end of the shaft and give it some clearance. So I'm going to see if I can move the bearing. I can see a line there where it's moving some. That moved quite a bit and it's still binding up. I'm going to go a little more. I'll put my finger on the bearing so I can feel how much it moves. That's close. A little bit more. If I tighten it, there's still some clearance. I'm going to move it a little bit more. Okay, that feels good. That moved more than I expected. They don't usually stick out that far. I'm going to go find an old bearing and see how long it really is. This is what's inside of there. Just a straight shaft with a little roller bearing on the end. The bearing presses into the block here. If I can hold on to the thing, you can tell by how much is sticking out of the block that there's not much pressed into the block. I don't really like that. I think there might be something wrong in there. If there's a problem with the shaft, that would be a big deal, because you have to pull the crankshaft to get that little governor shaft out. Okay, that's different. There's a piece of tubing on there. And the tiny little washer's missing. It should have a washer like this one that goes against that shoulder. If I put that tubing on here, it comes out close to the same place. I'll bet somebody lost the washer and put that tubing in there instead. I'm going to put this proper type of washer on there and see how it works. Well, now I have all kinds of end play, and I can push that bearing back in some. Okay, that feels pretty good. If I hold the old bearing up to there, it looks like at least half the bearing's engaged now, so that's better. I can live with that. Now when I put this disc on here, it should be able to turn, and it doesn't. So that's a totally different problem. Sometimes the disc can be bent, causing that, but this one looks flat. If I tighten the bushing, the disc don't fit into that groove. So that's a problem. That disc has to rotate freely. I'm going to put this in the lathe and modify it a little bit. This is a 3-jaw scroll chuck. All 3 jaws move at the same time, and when the part is gripped, it will be held very close to the center of rotation. It works perfectly for a 6-sided part. That keeps the left end of this part centered, but the right end is probably flopping around a bit. So I'm going to use this dial indicator to get that end running on center. According to the numbers on the dial, the outside end runout is about 16 thousandths of an inch. So the end of that thing is about 8 thousandths of an inch off center. First I touch the indicator so I know which way I have to move it. So when the dial moves clockwise, the part's coming towards me. I'm going to rotate the part so it's towards me as far as it'll go. And then I'm going to tap it with this chunk of aluminum to move it a little bit. And I'll try to go about half of the total indicator travel, or about 8 thousandths. Now my runout is a little under 2 thousandths. Try to move it halfway. And now that needle is moving less than a 1/2 thousandth. So that part is within 1/4 of a thousandth of being on center. Touch the indicator to make sure it's a valid reading. I'm going to tighten the chuck a little bit to make sure I have a good grip on it. That changed it a bit, so I'll adjust it a bit. Okay, that's close enough to being on center, and I have a good grip on it. I'm going to use this high-speed steel cutting tool because I can grind it to whatever shape I need. This time I need a square corner in the part, so I have a tool with a tiny radius on the end to reach into the corner. The part fits all the way against that back face, so that's where I'm going to remove the material. First I touch the tool on that face and set my indicator so I know where it is. I can't feel the machine as easily in this axis, so I'll use a piece of paper and move it in until I touch it. Now I know I'm about 3/1000ths away from the surface, a little less than the thickness of the paper, and I set my dial to 0 at that position. First I'll move in until I just touch the face and make sure my indicator's right. I'm going to take about 3/1000ths of an inch first. And now just 2 more thousandths for a total of 5. Make sure the part looks okay on there. That looks good. Since I have it in the lathe already, I'm going to take some material off of this end also. That will give the governor shaft more end play, and I'll be able to move that bearing in a little more. I'm only going to take off about 20/1000ths of an inch. Now I'm looking to see if I want to reestablish the chamfer on the outside. No, that's still okay. I'll use it like that. I do need to fix the chamfer on the inside of the hole. And I'll use some old emery cloth to remove the burrs. Now I'm expecting this to work, so I'm going to put it together. The bushing's tight and the disc is free, so that's good. And I have some more end play, so I can move the bearing in a little more. That's good there. I can move the shaft freely, and I can flop the disc freely. I'm okay with that. Well, that's as far as I'm going this time, and here's what it looks like. The engine's just sitting on there for the picture, but soon I'll be ready to bolt it down. Alright, that's it.